here we have another quote from Tiny Tim from the narrator. What this is really about is the generosity of spirit that Tiny Tim and his father show, even in really difficult circumstances. So Tiny Tim is returning from church here, having gone to church with Bob on Christmas Day. He hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. So let's zoom in this a little bit. So firstly, he hoped people saw him. Far from being embarrassed about his looks or his disability, Tiny Tim has a pride and an inner strength within him, which I think is admirable when we read it for the first time, and then even more heartbreaking when we realise what happens to Tiny Tim as time moves on in the book. Secondly, we obviously have the fact that they're going to church. The Cratchits have a Christian morality that Scrooge doesn't have. This really is a challenge and a comment from Dickens about how people may have seen themselves as Christian because they go to church on a Sunday, but the values and how they live their lives are not Christian. Walking past people in real poverty, scowling upon them and thinking upon them as lesser because they're poor rather than helping them out. That obviously isn't the Christian values that Dickens associated with Christianity. So the fact that Bob and Tiny Tim have gone to church and live their life through their Christian values is really a challenge to those people with money to say, well, these guys can do it, so why aren't you? So again, we have the Christian values come into it through this quote once more. Finally, moving forward, we might say, and it might be pleasant to them. Even in their desperation, Tiny Tim wants other people to be happy. Obviously, he's malnutritioned, he's hungry, he's disabled. He has an incredibly large family, all of them working very hard just to survive. Yet on this day, what Tiny Tim is thinking of is other people, possibly, probably, almost certainly other people in a much better off position than he have. Again, showing his generosity, his spirit, and just what an overall good kid he is. Next, we have to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. And this is obviously a reference to Jesus. Tiny Tim again shows us the Christian morality, and he's also grateful what he has been given in life, despite his terrible situation. And here he wants the story of Jesus to almost live through him, which is an amazing thing. So an amazing comment here, an amazing quotation really about Tiny Tim, which is obviously one of the most memorable characters in the book, and most people who have heard of Tiny Tim, even if they haven't read A Christmas Carol. In the context box there, I've just put a little bit of context about understanding what this is about. There was no NHS in the time when this was written, or the Victorian era. It'd be another 100 years before free hospitals were established. Medical help for the poor might be provided by charities or perhaps the church. Here we can see that Tiny Tim has had some medical help. He has a crutch and he has some kind of frame that helps him, we've seen before. But that would be it. In reality, for children like Tiny Tim, there'd be very little medical support for their conditions, and really they came from malnutrition. And again, we can see that Tiny Tim is still going to be malnutritioned. We just look at the dinner he's eating on Christmas Day.